Hello, my name's Matthew Armstrong. Today we're looking at the Language Focused Learning Strand and how to use the skill of speaking in that strand. So, the activities we're using are memorize sentences and dialogues. Here is the big overview of our four strands, and um, if you look in the speaking skill for language focused learning, you'll find these two activities. Now, remember, language focused learning is about deliberate learning of language, as in vocabulary, phrases. Um, it's not about sending a message to somebody or communicating messages or receiving messages. This is about learning. So a quarter of a course is spent here, and a quarter of that time is spent with this activity. So what in the world are these two activities? If you haven't seen the video on word cards, then go watch that video on word cards. Because basically, you do the same with the word cards. You write sentences that you're learning or dialogues onto cards, so one line at a time or a phrase. So if you just get started learning a language, you must start here before you start speaking, really. If you haven't memorized any phrases, if you haven't learned anything to say, then there's nothing to say, really. So that means before you can work with meaning-focused output for any of the speaking activities there, or the fluency output, you need to know something before you can use it. So start here if you're an absolute beginner. So if you're just beginning with memorized sentences, memorized dialogues, and you're just starting learning a language, then where do you start? Well, you can get a list of survival phrases and dialogues and memorize those. Once they're memorized, you could use those, uh, repeat those conversations with pair conversations with the meaning focus output, or role plays or prepared talks. And once you're familiar with that, you can practice it with fluency. So as you're learning sentences or dialogues, first start with a list of them. So after you have 100 or 120 words, phrases, or sentences, you can put them to use. So you either learn them all first, then start using them, or learn what you need for one dialogue, and then go and practice that dialogue, and do that until you've covered the whole list. Where can you get lists? You can go to, so you could do a Google search for Paul Nation. So Professor Paul Nation is the man who wrote most of the material all of the material that these presentations are based off of. So if you search for him, you'll find he has a staff page at University of Victoria at Wellington. So if you go here and you scroll down the page, you'll find a lot of vocabulary lists. So this is survival vocabulary. I've typed up all the languages that are there up to now. And if you don't see your language that you're learning, then you could take the English list and find a native speaker who could create a version of that list for you. So that's where you start. So if you're just learning, if you're starting to learn Portuguese, then you come here and you download the Portuguese file and you create study cards or word cards, just like with the word card video, but these are sentences and phrases that you write on the word cards. So there are some other techniques you can use to practice the speaking skill of the language focused learning strand. So a language learning technique that many people are familiar with is the shadowing technique. So shadowing technique that has various stages that you would go through. Essentially, you use a an audio with a text. And so day one is you might not know anything about the language. You just listen to the audio and you repeat it. And you do this for about 15 minutes. And you do that until you start making progress after several days. And then later you start looking at the text and you might have a translation of the text and you start learning more meaning of the text. But one element of it is that you do repeated intensive listening and you're speaking it out loud. So you're speaking over top of the dialogue. And you can go to Professor Alexander Argali's YouTube channel, and he has videos on the shadowing technique if you're interested in that. There's also reading aloud. So if you have a short text and it's dialogic in nature, as in it's a dialogue, you can read the dialogue out loud. It's better to have an audio so you can play the audio and you speak over top of the audio, or you could record yourself and then play and compare yourself with the audio. So the steps in this are relatively straightforward. So there's no demonstration for how to do this activity. Just go through the word cards video first, and you're just writing sentences onto cards and testing yourself with the word cards of the sentences.